What happened Saturday night at the Washington Hilton was serious, and it deserved serious coverage. A gunman armed with a shotgun, a handgun, and multiple knives charged a security checkpoint outside the White House Correspondents' Dinner, exchanged fire with law enforcement, and was taken into custody. President Trump, the First Lady, Vice President Vance, and senior cabinet members were evacuated from the ballroom by Secret Service. One officer was struck, saved by a bulletproof vest. Nobody else was hit. The suspect is in custody. That is the story. What happened after the story broke? In the hours that followed, in the political messaging, in the press conferences, and in the parallel diplomatic implosion happening a world away, is what we need to talk about today. Let's start with the messaging, because the speed and the uniformity of it was striking. Within minutes, and we're talking single-digit minutes, of the shooting becoming public knowledge, a wave of content began flooding social media with a single, coordinated theme. This is why we need President Trump's White House ballroom. That project, a proposed 90,000 square foot event space that would replace the White House East Wing at an estimated cost of around $60 million, has been mired in legal challenges for months. Courts have been weighing whether the administration bypassed legally required approvals. Critics have questioned the cost and the impact on a historic building. And yet, within the chaos of a live shooting incident, that project became the immediate political talking point, not the security failure, not the safety of journalists, not the well-being of the officers involved. The ballroom. Again and again, the ballroom. The coordination was notable. Not one or two voices saying it, a wave. And then there was Dana White. The UFC boss and one of the president's most prominent supporters was sitting at a table near the front of the ballroom when the commotion erupted. As guests were filing out of the Washington Hilton, White spoke to reporters about what he had experienced. "It started getting noisy," he said. "Tables getting flipped over, guys running in with guns, and they were screaming, 'Get down!' I didn't get down. It was effing awesome. I literally took every minute of it in, and it was a pretty crazy, unique experience." He acknowledged he had not directly seen the actual attack. The shooting occurred outside the ballroom perimeter near the security screening area, but the sentiment he expressed was clear. An assassination attempt on the President of the United States was, in his words, awesome. Now, Dana White is not a random figure here. He is the CEO of the UFC, and he is scheduled to co-host what is being marketed as the most elaborate sporting event ever held at the White House, UFC Freedom 250, scheduled for June 14th on the South Lawn. That event, which celebrates both the nation's 250th anniversary and the president's 80th birthday, is expected to cost in the range of $60 million, with the UFC covering the full tab. White's proximity to this administration, both literally on the night of the shooting and figuratively in terms of political alignment, makes his casual characterization of the incident worth pausing on. Then there is the matter of what was said before the shooting even began. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt, speaking to media on the red carpet before the dinner, teased the president's planned remarks by saying, and this is the direct quote, "There will be some shots fired tonight in the room." She was, clearly, speaking metaphorically about sharp political jokes. Nobody is suggesting otherwise. But in the hours after a real shooting, that clip circulated widely, and the juxtaposition was jarring. Context matters. Language matters. And in an environment already charged with political tension, those words carried an uncomfortable echo. A Fox News correspondent present at the scene described, during a live call-in, an unsettling exchange she had with Leavitt's husband, who she said was seated next to her at the dinner. She said he leaned over before things got underway, told her she did a great job on television, urged her to be very safe, looked around the room in a serious manner, and then began to say something further, at which point the phone line was cut. Whether that line dropped due to network congestion from hundreds of guests all trying to use their phones at the same moment, or for another reason, cannot be confirmed. What is confirmed is that a reporter described that exchange in real time and then was no longer audible. Now let's talk about what was actually confirmed about the shooting itself. The suspect has been identified as Cole Allen, a 31-year-old from Torrance, California, a Los Angeles suburb. He holds an undergraduate degree in mechanical engineering from Caltech and a master's in computer science from California State University, Dominguez Hills. He was, authorities say, a guest at the Washington Hilton. He had checked in the day before the event. He traveled to Washington by train from Los Angeles, stopping in Chicago en route. He charged a security magnetometer checkpoint at 8:36 in the evening, armed with a 12-gauge shotgun purchased in August 2025 and a semi-automatic pistol purchased in 2023, along with multiple knives. He exchanged fire with Secret Service agents and was subdued and arrested outside the ballroom. He never entered the room itself. The officer struck by gunfire was protected by a bulletproof vest and is expected to fully recover. No guests were physically harmed. In a manifesto shared with family members in the minutes before the attack, Allen described himself as the friendly federal assassin and made clear he intended to target Trump administration officials. He apparently did not specifically name the correspondence dinner in that document. A family member who received the writings contacted police after the shooting, and investigators confirmed they believe Allen acted alone. Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche confirmed Sunday morning that the suspect appeared to be targeting members of the administration and that charges are expected to include using a firearm during a crime of violence and assault on a federal officer with a dangerous weapon. U.S. Attorney Jeanine Pirro, herself a former Fox News host who was appointed by Trump to serve as the top federal prosecutor in Washington, D.C., confirmed the charges publicly and indicated arraignment would occur Monday. Wolf Blitzer, who has attended approximately 30 White House Correspondents' dinners in his career with CNN, described the security around the Washington Hilton on Saturday night as the tightest he had ever seen at any such event. He was outside the main ballroom when the shots were fired and described being only feet away from the gunman before officers pulled him to the ground and ushered him to safety in a nearby room. He described the shooter as firing what appeared to be a serious weapon at least 6 times before being tackled by law enforcement. And then came the press conference. President Trump returned to the White House after being evacuated and addressed reporters in the briefing room. He called the suspect a lone wolf, confirmed the officer's bulletproof vest had saved his life, and called the Secret Service's response exemplary. He also, within hours of a live shooting at a public event, invoked the incident as a reason to build the White House ballroom. The Washington Hilton, he said, was not a particularly secure building. A dedicated White House facility, he argued, would be drone-proof, equipped with bulletproof glass and far more appropriate for events of this scale. He suggested the Secret Service and the military had been pushing for a ballroom of this kind for well over a century. He also said, and this is the other strand of this story, that the incident was not going to deter him from winning the war in Iran. That statement is worth dwelling on, because just hours earlier on the same day as the shooting, a significant diplomatic rupture had occurred. For weeks, the Trump administration had been positioning a meeting in Islamabad, Pakistan, as a potential turning point in the ongoing conflict with Iran. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and presidential son-in-law Jared Kushner were set to travel there for talks brokered by Pakistan's government, which has positioned itself as the primary mediator in the conflict. Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi had traveled to Pakistan as part of what he described on social media as a multilateral diplomatic tour, including stops in Islamabad, Muscat, and Moscow, to coordinate with regional partners on a possible framework for ending the war. The critical detail: Araghchi had made no commitment to meet with American negotiators. Iran's foreign ministry spokesperson said explicitly in a public post, "No meeting is planned to take place between Iran and the U.S." The Iranian side had consistently signaled that direct engagement required, as preconditions, the lifting of the American naval blockade of Iranian ports and a halt to what Tehran described as operational threats during the negotiating period. None of those conditions had been met. On Friday, Trump had publicly suggested that Iran was making an offer and that his envoys were preparing to meet the Iranian delegation in Pakistan. By Saturday morning, Araghchi had departed Islamabad after holding meetings with Pakistan's Prime Minister, Army Chief, and Foreign Minister, none of them American, and had moved on to Oman, the next stop on his tour. About an hour after Araghchi left Pakistan, Trump posted to Truth Social, announcing that he had canceled his delegation's travel. "Too much time wasted on traveling, too much work," he wrote, adding that there was tremendous infighting and confusion within Iran's leadership, and that if Tehran wanted to talk, all they had to do was call. Multiple independent outlets, including Al Jazeera, the Associated Press, NPR, and CNBC, confirmed that Iran had never committed to meeting with Witkoff and Kushner in the first place. Araghchi himself wrote publicly after leaving Islamabad, "Have yet to see if the U.S. is truly serious about diplomacy." Pakistan's role as honest broker was, at minimum, severely tested. The president was asked directly whether he had sent Witkoff and Kushner to Pakistan to negotiate with Iran. He cited the length of the flight, 18 hours, he said at various points, and the fact that the anticipated meeting had been pushed to Tuesday as his stated reasons for canceling. He did say that after he canceled, Iran produced a new offer, but that it wasn't enough. The optics of a diplomatic effort that collapsed before it began, on the same day as a domestic security incident of this magnitude, were not favorable. The backdrop to all of this is the damage picture from the conflict itself. NBC News reported Saturday morning, citing 3 U.S. officials, 2 congressional aides, and an independent assessment from the American Enterprise Institute, that Iranian strikes on American military bases across the Middle East had caused substantially more damage than the Pentagon has publicly acknowledged. The report describes strikes across 7 countries hitting warehouses, command headquarters, aircraft hangars, satellite communications infrastructure, runways, high-end radar systems, and dozens of aircraft. Repair costs are estimated to run into the billions of dollars, with the American Enterprise Institute's assessment suggesting the figure may exceed $5 billion. Perhaps the most striking detail in that reporting is the account of an Iranian F-5 fighter jet successfully bombing Camp Buehring in Kuwait during the early days of the conflict, penetrating layered American air defenses. Officials cited by NBC described that as the first time an enemy fixed-wing aircraft had struck an American military installation in years. The Pentagon has declined to comment publicly on battlefield damage assessments, citing operational security. Republican congressional aides, according to the same report, have described frustration at receiving no specifics from the Pentagon, despite repeated requests, even as the administration has sought a record-high military budget. And so we arrive at the full picture of a single Saturday. A diplomatic failure in South Asia, an undisclosed military damage report surfacing in Washington, a shooting at the most high-profile media event of the year, and a political apparatus that had, within minutes of the first shots, turned the entire episode into an advertisement for a ballroom. The questions that deserve serious attention are being crowded out. How did a hotel guest, traveling alone with a shotgun and a written manifesto, get this close to the president, to the vice president, to the cabinet, to hundreds of journalists, at an event that CNN's Wolf Blitzer described as having the tightest security he had ever seen in 3 decades of attending? What does that tell us about the scalability of protective measures when the president attends large public events? What is the actual status of the Iran conflict, and who is accountable for the gap between the damage figures the Pentagon reports publicly and what independent and congressional assessments are finding? Those are the stories. The ballroom is not the story. The UFC event is not the story. But the speed with which peripheral narratives consume the coverage of a real and serious incident tells us something about the media environment, about political messaging infrastructure, and about what it means to ask hard questions in a moment designed to prevent them from being asked. We'll be watching all of it closely. Make sure you're subscribed and that you have notifications on because there is a great deal more reporting to come on every one of these threads.